Let's go to the defending two-time Super Bowl champions here. And it is the Kansas City Chiefs. Alex, before we get into their schedule and their additions and subtractions, there's a lot on the line for Kansas City this year, even from taking the betting perspectives out of things. Kansas City is looking to be the first ever team to win 3 straight Super Bowls. That has never happened, even with the great runs of the Steelers and the Patriots. None of them ever won 3 straight. Never happened. Kansas City looks to be the first team to do that. It's also seemingly the era where it's the hardest to make deep playoff runs year after year after year. And here we are, Kansas City, every year that Patrick Mahomes has been the starting quarterback, they have been in the AFC title game, Alex. So it's interesting here from a handicapping perspective of a season-long thing for the Chiefs of how much is this team going to be invested in for the regular season. We saw last year they were arguably even bad at points during the last season and won the Super Bowl. Didn't matter that they had to go on the road and win 2 playoff games away from home. But this is a little bit of a harder handicap regular season-wise for the Chiefs because beginning of the schedule is pretty difficult, first 6 games. After that, it really does soften up after that, Alex.
It does, and it's the 12th easiest schedule based off of win totals from Sharp Football Analysis. So they still got some breaks here for this schedule. I can't bet against Kansas City right now. Their roster looks even better than last year, and looking at what they went through last year, not taking the regular season very serious and kind of pulling themselves back up, I can't see them repeating that same thing. I like their win total over. I know that they just barely went over last year. They were 12-5, and I believe it's 11.5. But going through their schedule, I can see a pretty easy path for them to get over that win total. It helps a lot when their division has not been very competitive. And there's a lot on the line for the Chargers and Harbaugh because we're expecting a lot from that. But up until this point, they have not been very competitive and made that pretty easy for them. And I think this year, it's going to take another year for the Chargers. So I think the Chiefs will be okay. I'm definitely not betting against them, and I'm not betting and laying that 220 to win the division.
If you just look at this division as a whole, the Broncos, you and I just said, worst team in the AFC potentially. You just mentioned it there. You think the Chargers are 1 year away. I would agree, at least being able to compete for a division. Maybe not a playoff spot, but for a division. We'll have the Chargers tomorrow, by the way, as well. The Raiders, we'll get to them tomorrow. I think their defense is going to be awesome, but I think their offense is lacking in a big way. Kansas City, it's just for their win total, you mentioned it. You like over 11.5. It is very difficult to get those high numbers home. There's a reason that you very rarely see anything now in this day and age north of 11.5. Niners were 11.5 well. Baltimore is 11.5 as well. Those are the 3 big ones right now this year. That first 6-game stretch is genuinely difficult. Genuinely difficult. Yeah, they have the home games to begin the season, but they're short favorite against Baltimore, which some people have taken some big positions on Baltimore here, leading us into the season.
Yeah, no more 3s out there, really.
Yeah, all 2.5.
Only getting 2.5.
All 2.5. Cincinnati has played Kansas City pretty well, all things considered. Beat them in the AFC title game, has beat them in the regular season whenever Burrow has played.
Right.
In the Burrow era. Atlanta on Sunday night, I don't think is a gimme. I think the Chiefs will win, but I don't think that's a gimme. At the Chargers divisional game, they'll beat the Saints on a Monday night, but at San Francisco, Niners will be favored in that game more likely than not.
Yes.
So it's a really difficult first 5 of 6, not including New Orleans. But after that, boy, at Buffalo won't be an easy game. Buffalo manages to beat Kansas City in the games that don't really matter. They don't beat them in the playoffs. At the Browns, I don't know what Cleveland's going to be in Week 15. I know that will be probably a bad weather game in December in Cleveland, but I don't know what the Browns are going to be at that point. I'm lower on them. We'll get to the Browns next week when we do the AFC North. At Pittsburgh, again, I'm low on Pittsburgh. That game against the Texans is a Saturday night. The Steeler game is Christmas on a Wednesday this year. Wednesday night football, great, right? But this is, to me, I think that 11.5 is a perfectly good number. I don't think it's a bettable number for me. If you feel there's an edge, absolutely go for it. I probably wouldn't go under because if they get out 2-0, that win total is going to vault. They get out 2-0, that win total is going to vault even to 12.5, maybe even 13 in those in-season numbers. I would look to go under those in-season numbers. I think 11.5 sharp. But if you get north of it, 12.5, 13.5 in-season, that would be when I would look to come under, Alex.
I think you could go either way, too. And if you want to wait it out, and if they go 0-2 and lose to the Ravens and the Bengals to start this season, and you get a better number, I mean, look at week 10 through 18, like you already mentioned. That part of their season is very easy, or not easy, but doable for this team. So, yeah, either way you want to play it. I don't love going over double-digit win totals and betting them, but I wouldn't go under as well. So I would only go over.
Looking at the division as a whole real quick, Alex, I know we'll do this as well over the weekend. There are your current full numbers for the division. Chiefs, again, they have not, going on a decade now, winning the division straight, Alex. Minus 220, plus 325 on the Chargers, 7-1 on the Raiders, 20-1. Boy, that price even at 20-1 is not steep enough on Denver to win the division. You didn't like minus 220. I think I don't like laying prices like that, but I'd much rather lay this one than the Niners in the NFC West, because at least in the NFC West, I can really make a case for a healthy Rams that, hey, the Rams could win 11, 12 games. Purdy goes a little bit backwards. There's a little disharmony with the Ayuk and Samuel contract situations, even the slightest defensive regression in San Francisco. The Rams could steal the division. It would take a Mahomes injury in order for Kansas City. If they won a division last year comfortably, when they were mediocre for an extended period of time last year, even though they won the Super Bowl, I don't see any of these teams catching them. So I don't mind laying minus 220. Really don't. Would have liked it to be $1.90, but I think minus 220 is a totally fair price to lay, at least on my end in the division with Kansas City.
I would look for books that have the exact order and see what kind of odds you can get for right there, what the South Point is giving you. I like that order right there with the Chiefs, Chargers, Raiders, Broncos. Might do a little bit on switching the Chargers and the Raiders and having both of those in pocket. But yeah, I mean, when you're talking about this roster, we don't know Rashee Rice yet if he's going to be suspended for a little bit. So they could be without him, but adding Hollywood Brown was huge for them because wide receiver was their worst position last year. We know Travis Kelce is getting a little bit older, but he's still Travis Kelce and still finds a way. Pacheco has turned out to be a really good running back in this league. And then they have their interior O-line that is just so good with Thuney and Humphrey. So, I mean, I just don't see this team taking a huge step backwards. I think they've got this division on lock, and just looking at their numbers from last year, I mean, they're even, especially defensively. I mean, that's what really held them too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, second in opponent points per game, fifth in opponent yards per game. So, and getting their DC back and their offensive coordinator back as well. So, looks like they're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, as long as Spags is there, even if they have a down portion of the regular season defensively, you know that they'll come on in the post. We've seen this with Spagnuolo enough. We know what we're getting out of him. I was going to say, instead of laying that 220, them to win the AFC Championship plus 175. Now, I think here's the one. I'm happy you brought that up. The one issue with betting Kansas City to win the AFC or win the Super Bowl right now is we're almost assuredly going to get better numbers at some point during the regular season. Something will happen. Even if it's as simple as Baltimore goes to Arrowhead and beats them week 1. As simple as that. If the Ravens pull a short upset week 1. At some point, we're going to get better numbers. Look.
Lions pulled a short upset last year.
Beat them last year.
Go up?
Beat them last year, week 1. That kind of was the announcement, hey, the Lions are for real again, are now for real, and they showed out to be the whole year. It's interesting, though, this AFC, and I thought it last year, and it didn't play out that way, where the AFC turned into this really jumbled mess more so than anything. I think we were talking about it before the show. I think there's 12 of the 16 teams are capable of making the playoffs and I think winning a playoff game this year. 12 of the 16. I know some will probably argue with me on Pittsburgh, with Indianapolis, with Jacksonville. There will be some arguments mixed in there. They're like, no, they're not capable of doing that. But I really do think that 3/4 of this league is capable of getting to the postseason, winning a playoff game. And I don't think it will be as easy for Kansas City to go on the road if they have to and win multiple playoff games on the road, because I think Cincinnati is much better than they were a year ago. They weren't in the playoffs. Burrow was hurt. Baltimore, if they happen to be as good as they were a year ago, have to learn from what happened to them in the AFC title game. Run the football, Baltimore, where they abandoned the run in that game. Buffalo, the AFC East teams, one of those 3 AFC East teams, is winning 12 or 13 games. I just don't know which one it is. I know people are down on Buffalo. Still think they're pretty good. I think the market might actually be overcorrecting the other way on them. Miami, maybe they're a regular season team that's great in the regular season. And if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy for the Jets, their roster is as good as anyone in the AFCs. So there are a lot more teams around Kansas City that make it hard to justify an AFC future or a Super Bowl future, which is why I lean to the division. I also like your angle of the exact order, where that order of the teams are right now. I think that's a pretty good order of what it finishes. Chiefs 1, Charger 2, Raider 3, Denver 4. I think if you can find that exact and the price is right, I think that's pretty good too.
I mean, the bookmakers, they're pretty good at their job, right? Yeah. So those odds are pretty good. I was pretty shocked to see the Raiders are 10-1 to win the AFC Championship.
Is that here?
Yes.
Yeah, there's some
local.
There's some local angles baked in, I would say, more so than anything. Or someone came in here and bet them huge would be the only explanations that make much sense, because they're 7-1 to win the division, 10-1 to win the AFC.
Right.
Don't bet the Raiders to win the AFC, kids. Don't do that. You mentioned it real quick. I just want to bring up additions, because they really added to the wide receiver room. You mentioned it, Rashee Rice probably getting suspended for multiple offseason incidences. One with a potential assault, one with that horrendous street racing accident as well in Dallas. Drafting Xavier Worthy and signing Hollywood Brown. I know people like to get on Marquise Brown. Just, hey, he's not that good. Hollywood Brown will fit very nicely on this team. And Xavier Worthy will fit very nicely on this team. On paper, this offense is stronger than it was a year ago. It just doesn't always work out that way, as we know. They also, actually, of course, this is the first time we're mentioning a punter in any of these. We mentioned 2 punters. Matt Arazia, who hadn't played in the NFL since leaving San Diego State. There was the accusation of sexual assault that ended up not being true. He is signed. He's the punter now because Tommy Townsend signed a nice contract in Houston. So that's a little bit different. I don't think there's any difference in the punters. I think they were top 5 punting last year. They'll be top 5 again. They do lose L'Jarius Sneed defensively, which is a big one at the cornerback position, Alex, where they look to replace his impact with Nazay Johnson, and of course Trent McDuffie will move over from the slot and now have to play on the outside. Yeah,
I think that is the only major departure that could hurt them. I mean, they did retain Chris Jones, which is really the heart and soul of that defense. So I think they will be okay. But yeah, I like their wide receiver room now, and I don't imagine that Rice will be out for too long. And he really had a good rookie season. And then with Brown, I mean, his numbers weren't great in Arizona, but he didn't have Kyler Murray for most of that time. And they were much better when he was in Baltimore.
Yeah, I think this is the best version you're going to see of Hollywood Brown in the NFL. I really do. I think the best version of him.
I mean, you have the best quarterback in the league.
It doesn't hurt, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt. I will say, we don't know. We have no idea on the Rashee Rice front. We don't know. It could be 3 games, could be 7 games, could be 10. We don't know. We really have no idea. It could be 0. I doubt it would be, but it could be 0. So
I guess
it could be anything.
It could
anything
be
with Rashee Rice at this point. So we'll see how it all plays out.